Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Bryant with Paladin Financial, one of the advisors here at Paladin. Today, I will be taking you through our quarterly webinar, this one focused on estate planning. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you are watching this live or has signed up to watch it live, we will be getting this on our website to go along with all the other webinars that we have archived. So before we get started on the estate planning side of things, I do want to take a moment to brag a little bit about Paladin Financial. We were very recently named Best of 2025 for the financial services category in White Bear Lake Magazine. So big shout out to and a big thank you for all of you out there who voted for us to make that happen. All right, so for all of our clients watching, you should be familiar with what we call the Paladin Plan. So this is something that we cover when we get together and do ongoing reviews. All of our clients get what's called the Paladin Plan. At the center of it, of course, is you. Now, it comes with two main components. One is a written plan. There's also the numeric plan. Everybody wants to know, of course, the numbers that go into retirement. But the written plan is as important as well. So the different topics that we cover, you'll see there on the right, everything from what are your goals and dreams or concerns that you may have, down through risk management, tax planning, income planning, insurance planning, health and long-term care, and investment management. And of course, that fifth one down is where we're spending time today. That is legacy and enhanced planning. So with enhanced planning or estate planning, it's just something that we want to make sure is buttoned up, and we put it at the top of the written Paladin plan, and we do it at the top for a reason. It's one that is not always the most fun to think about and can often be too easily kicked down the road. So we have the written plan. It's there to hold each other accountable. Not all things are necessarily pressing. Everybody's in a different phase of life as it pertains to retirement. So the 35-year-olds out there that we work with don't have a big concern for Medicare, but there are other things that need to happen. So that written plan is a living, breathing document that we address and ideally check things off as time goes on, but it's also, again, a way for us to hold each other accountable. All right, so the four pillars, that's what we talk about when we say financial, health, tax, and estate planning. Oftentimes we'll meet with people that have one or two of these done pretty well, but they've neglected to address the other ones. And if you don't have all of these in a good spot, your best laid plans can quickly be derailed. So today, we're focusing on the estate planning side of things. If you've watched our webinars or if you followed our podcasts, which again, everything's available on our website, we've talked about these other topics in pretty good detail. So today we're going to focus a little bit on the estate planning side of things. And really, there's three main components that go into it. The documents, of course, estate planning is a lot of legal documents and legal things having set in place to make sure your wishes are carried out efficiently. There are strategies, whether it's the estate planning strategy itself, whether it's passing assets to heirs time efficiently, but tax efficiently as well. And there's also the communication. So part of the estate planning, it's not just the dotting your I's and crossing your T's, it's having the conversations with your kids, with your grandkids, with your heirs, just to spell out what your intentions are, what they can expect when you pass away. Now, it's not obviously an easy conversation to have, but it is important, and the folks that spend time thinking about it and doing it, the transition from when they pass away to their heirs receiving assets goes much more smoothly. All right, so what is estate planning? Basically, it's a way to ensure that your assets are distributed or that your wishes are carried out after you die, or if you become incapacitated while you're still living. The idea behind it is that it's done efficiently so that you or your heirs don't have to go through the court system or spend a lot of time and money trying to settle something that could have been prevented in the first place. There are a ton of components that go into estate planning. We'll keep it a little higher level today and talk about some common ones that fit with a lot of people. Commonly, you'll see revocable living trusts. The will is, something that most people are aware of. However, there are some things about the will and testament that people are surprised by. We'll talk a little bit about that. Financial powers of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. We can talk about healthcare directives. So those are the things that form the core of an estate plan, and those are things that at the very least you want to consider getting in place. Now, common myths, and we hear these all the time. In the past, years and years ago, I've been guilty of thinking some of these same things. It's only for old rich people. Not true. If you own anything at all, technically you have an estate. Now, what also happens if you don't make it to old age? Well, then your heirs or somebody has to be there to settle the estate that you have. I'll tell you a personal story later on about dying young and what that looks like. So you aren't too young to think about it. And also think about if you are on the younger side, but you have a young family, kids that are minors, you have a spouse, like that's a very important thing to make sure you have protection built around. You don't want to get into a situation where, God forbid, you die prematurely and you have young ones and a surviving spouse that is left to pick up the pieces. It's hard enough with the grieving process, much less having to deal with the legal and financial aspects at all. Now, it takes too long. Number 3 there. Yeah, it's not a fast process. Now, there are certainly people to help, and I'll talk a little bit about what Paladin can do. I'll also talk about estate planning attorneys and what they can do, but there are people there to hold your hand and make it as efficient as possible. But if you don't take care of these things while you're still alive and have control, they still have to be addressed once you pass away. So just because you ignore it doesn't mean it gets ignored forever. At some point, it will have to be addressed. And oftentimes, by the time that happens, significantly more resources have to be put into everything. Lawyer fees are too expensive. Yes, there is a cost to setting up an estate plan, but similar to how long it takes to do, the costs at some point have to be covered by somebody. So if you say, you know what, it's too expensive, I'll worry about it later, I don't want to do it, and then you pass away, well, your heirs will likely still have to hire an attorney. They will still have to potentially go through the probate process, pay fees, maybe higher taxes. So the cost will exist one way or another. It's best if you take advantage of being able to make those decisions yourself. And I have a will, I'm good. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of a will later, but also some of the shortcomings that go along with it. All right, so one of the key considerations when it comes to estate planning is who do you want to inherit your assets? So we have 3 main categories on here: family, or you can think of friends as well. Charity is a very popular one for a lot of folks. Not many people choose government. And what we mean by government, really twofold. One, orphaned assets or forgotten accounts where you didn't have things spelled out clearly and you pass away and your heirs are going through your things. They think they find all the financial accounts, but lo and behold, there's a 401k from 15, 20 years ago with $50,000 in it. They don't get any notice of that. They don't know it exists. It gets basically orphaned and goes into a pot of money where hopefully it gets claimed at some point, but there's no guarantee that that will happen because you didn't tell anybody about it. Also, by government, we mean just excess fees to the probate or court system and paying more than your fair share of taxes. So there are planning concepts that can help transition your estate in a tax efficient manner. One of the things that a lot of our clients take advantage of is what's called qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. So taking a step back and going to Financial Planning 101, RMD, or required minimum distribution, is when the government tells you you have to take money out of your IRA or your pre-tax 401k or 403b or pre-tax TSP, whatever it may be. They are going to force you to take money out at a certain time in the future in your 70s, because if you think back to how those accounts were funded, you got a tax break for putting it in. It grew without capital gains taxes, so the government's never been able to get their hands on that money. So there's a calculation based on your age and how much is in the account that at some point you have to take the money out, whether you need it or not. That is a taxable event where you have to pay income taxes. If you've gotten to the point where that is not money that you need to live on, a lot of folks like to donate that to charity. So rather than writing a check and donating it, you basically set it up to donate your RMD to charity. And so that reduces your taxable income, which right off the bat is a tax savings, but it also can reduce your state income taxes. So we're in one of the higher state income tax states, Minnesota. We're also one of the last few states in Minnesota that still taxes Social Security at some level. So reducing how much is stacking up in terms of income can help you avoid some of those. And then if you make enough money, you also have IRMA, or surcharge on your Medicare premium. So those are planning things that we want to sit down with clients and examine. And if those RMDs are not needed to live off of, there are ways to scratch that philanthropic itch and also reduce your taxes at the same time. So what is probate? So basically it means to prove. It's the legal procedure where assets are formally passed to beneficiaries. Now, the probate process is a process overseen by the courts. So there is a judge that will say, okay, based on what I know about this situation, assets will be distributed as such. So it is a time-consuming process. Even if you think you have a very simple and straightforward estate, it is a time-consuming process. There still has to be legal notices filed. A lot of times an attorney needs to be hired to help navigate that. It can delay the transition of assets to the beneficiaries. It's stressful. Think of when this is happening. This is happening after you've passed away. So not only is there a mourning or a grieving process, there's also a pretty significant financial and time strain on everything. And most people don't live in this world, so they're trying to navigate something that is completely new to them. It could also be expensive. Going back to what I said in a few slides previous, if you don't elect to pay the cost to set it up prior to your passing, somebody on the back end will be picking up the cost to navigate this system themselves, not to mention the lack of tax planning and potential fees just with navigating the probate process. So what are some things we can do? Living trusts are one concept we'll get into here in a little bit. The idea there is to do an end run around the probate process. You've named beneficiaries essentially inside of a vehicle, which is the trust. It's a living trust, so you have the flexibility of amending that as time goes on, but it gives you the flexibility to avoid the court process altogether. And really, the low-hanging fruit when it comes to these types of things is just making sure you have beneficiaries listed on your investment accounts, whether it's a 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, individual brokerage account, just making sure you actually list somebody on there. It takes all of 5 minutes to do through most financial institutions. It's something we cover during our annual review process, just because things change and we just want to make sure that there hasn't been an error and things are actually set up as they should be. So one of the things to consider, and hopefully this, if you're one of those folks that doesn't want to think about it or keeps kicking that can down the road, we want to talk a little bit about preserving family harmony. Now, this is a sensitive subject, right? You're talking about your own mortality. There's likely difficult conversations to have. You may have a blended family. Some kids may not be doing as well as others. So there's a lot of considerations to make. Ideally, though, you're making those decisions and having those conversations while you're still alive and of sound mind. Things tend to go much better in the long run when that is the situation. So one question, how often you get to play the estate game in your lifetime? You know, you can tweak things and change beneficiaries, but really once, right? You get to do it and then you pass away. And so that leads to, how do you know if you did a good job? Really, you don't, because you've passed away. It's those left behind that are going to either thank you for having something set up so things move efficiently, or they'll be wondering what happened and why they are spending hours and hours and lots of money trying to get things settled. So let's think about what your legacy will be, not only from assets and memories, but also immediately after you've passed. How stressful is life getting things settled? And this is a big one. What does the family portrait look like? Does Thanksgiving change? Is there going to be animosity amongst the siblings? What does the summer weekend at the cabin look like? So give it time, think it through. You know, you've made it to the point in most cases where you've successfully retired. Let's not let this final thing derail everything else. So spend some time on it, have the conversations with your loved ones, and you know, you will be thanked down the road. All right, so powers of attorney, I alluded to this at the beginning. There's the financial power of attorney, and then there's the healthcare power of attorney, as well as a healthcare directive. So the financial power of attorney gives your agent, the person you name, full legal authority to manage your financial affairs and assets not owned in a trust, for example. Why the financial power of attorney? So let's say you're alive, but you become incapacitated in some manner. This person is someone you trust that can step in and make financial decisions on your behalf, making sure bills still get paid. Perhaps you're incapacitated and need a higher level of health care, which has a cost. They're there to make sure things can transition as smoothly as possible. In a similar vein, we have the healthcare power of attorney. That person is there to help make healthcare decisions on your behalf, again, if you can't make those decisions for yourself, as well as a healthcare directive. Now, ideally, you've spent the time to give thought to who these people might be in your life, rather than having something happen and then the state is making that decision or naming somebody on your behalf. My father has gone through the estate planning process. I, who work in finance, am listed as his financial power of attorney. My younger sister, she is a registered nurse. She is the healthcare power of attorney. That works great for us. We both are familiar with those respective industries, but it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to have somebody that lives in the industry being named as that person. It's just somebody you can trust that you believe will have your best interest at heart. The last will and testament. So this is a legal document that communicates your final wishes pertaining to assets and dependents, think possessions, whether you're leaving them to another person, having them donated, whatever it may be. The will is just your way of communicating on a legal form, a legal piece of paper, what you want to have carried out once you pass away. The revocable living trust is a vehicle whereby you can really construct it in any number of ways, but you are able to build this trust and then have assets put inside of the trust. And then upon your passing, there are specific instructions on how that trust is distributed. So whether you are married and your spouse continues with the trust assets or whether they get distributed in any number of ways to as many beneficiaries or charities as you want. It gives you a lot of flexibility and peace of mind and protection on how your final wishes actually get carried out. Now, one nice thing is that they avoid probate. So probate, again, is that court process where everything has to go through the court system and gets distributed based on the final verdict of the courts. The living trust comes with a lot of flexibility. You can change it at any time. You can move assets in and move assets out. So it's not like you're locked into the decision you make today. It is something that can be adjusted as time goes on. So the main components, we have the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. A lot of times the grantor and the trustee are the same person until you pass away, and then a spouse might pick up if it's a joint revocable trust, or upon their passing, then the trust essentially kicks in and it gets distributed to the beneficiaries that you've named. Again, provides a lot of flexibility. While you are living, you are able to make changes and move things in and out of the trust itself, or change the language of the trust if things happen in life, whether kids are no longer minors, or if you are predeceased by somebody. There's things that can be amended inside the trust to continue to fulfill your wishes. So going back to the beginning, one of the surprising things about the will, it does not necessarily stop the probate process. Having just a will in place, it's more easily contested by surviving family, and it may be honored, but it has to go through the court process first, which going through the court process is a public thing. So all of your estate essentially is now a public thing. It does provide a guide to the courts, and for your benefit, hopefully it gets carried out as you wish, but it doesn't avoid some of the pitfalls of estate planning, which are not having the estate. Is it doesn't necessarily protect from creditors. It doesn't help your tax situation necessarily. It is much more straightforward to do, but because it is easier, there are some downfalls like I just named. Now the trust, that can really button things up and help avoid the probate process, which again keeps things private. It gives you more control, as we've talked about in the previous slide. There are all kinds of different trusts. They go well beyond just the living trust. An irrevocable trust can help protect your assets from creditors and estate taxes. So there's all kinds of planning that can be done around the estate planning process and utilizing trust. It's not just the living trust, although that is a very common one. There's a lot of ways to structure things to help make your estate as bulletproof as possible. All right, so shifting gears into some real world examples. Roughly 2/3 of Americans have no estate plan in place. Again, we've highlighted the reasons why people don't do it, but that is a shockingly large number of Americans that have nothing done. An article says an executor, so the person basically, if you pass away, who's there to take everything through the probate process and make sure everything gets cleaned up. It can take up to 500 hours, if not more, to settle an estate. It can also take 9 months to multiple years to get through. And just a couple of personal stories that I'll touch on here in a sec, but all of us here at Paladin Financial have some sort of estate planning story that we could tell, both good and bad, from personal lives or from working with clients. So I'm going to start with what I would say has been a smooth one so far. So I'm going to use my parents as an example. I grew up in Kansas. My dad and mom, so go back 6 years ago, my mom passed away from cancer. So 2019, she passed away. She had been diagnosed with cancer in her early 60s. At some point, it became clear that the treatment was not working anymore. terrible thing. Cancer is awful. I know it's touched pretty much everybody's lives in some capacity. The silver lining with knowing that the end is near is it allowed them to sit down and actually give thought to how things should transition. So they were able to have conversations with us, build an estate plan whereby her assets became my dad's assets. There's considerations to make as far as pension and Social Security that she was receiving. So not fun in that scenario to have to go through, but it made that transition very seamless. Which, you know, going back to what I've said already, it's a difficult time in people's lives already when someone passes away. This was just one thing that was done ahead of time and made things a lot easier upon that passing. Another one is much more recent. So I have two sisters, and our brother passed away earlier this year, very suddenly, very unexpectedly. He was very successful financially, had done well, diligent saver, good investor, never married, no kids, did not have really much at all in place as far as estate planning goes. So he passes away, of course, the shock to the system, and we're all navigating that and the grief and everything that goes along with it, planning a funeral, all those sorts of things. But then there was also the project of figuring out where were all of his accounts. He had multiple financial institutions that he used. Some accounts had beneficiaries named, some had no beneficiaries, some had our late mother as beneficiary. So each custodian or each financial institution had its own hoops to jump through, their own process for doing things. So we are, going through multiple different essentially projects, trying to figure out where everything is and make sure everything gets settled efficiently. And because he didn't name beneficiaries in a lot of cases, that makes it even more difficult to figure out, well, what was his intention all along. He also had properties in multiple states. So the flights we've made to different states, the driving from Minnesota to Kansas, the cleaning out the house and going through personal effects, it's a significant time commitment, not to mention it costs a lot of money, not to mention the emotional side of it. So fortunately, we have a strong family and people, everybody's chipping in, but that's not the case with everybody. And even though he was young and hadn't given that thought, like that's unfortunately more common than most people think. So that's why we encourage you, spend the time thinking about it, make that transition as easy as possible if worst case scenario you did pass away. But there's significant costs as far as money and time that goes into these things if you don't give proper thought to how you want things carried out. This is, again, I said it earlier, but very basic. Have all accounts been reviewed and are beneficiaries up to date? This is one of the things we review at every meeting with clients. Are your beneficiaries up to date? We often see, not often, but occasionally we'll see a new 401k plan get set up through your work. All your assets move over, but for whatever reason, there was a clerical error and then the beneficiaries did not transfer. I've seen that with clients in the past. So that's one example. Maybe you have an old life insurance policy that has an ex-spouse listed on there. That's probably not who you want inheriting the life insurance when you pass away. So those things are easy to have fall by the wayside as you live life and things are busy. So sit down. That's why you have an advisor. Sit down and review these things and make sure you're as buttoned up as possible. Some folks want a gift now. They don't want to wait until they pass away to have assets transferred to their heirs. They want to see the kids or the grandkids or the charities use the money while they're still alive. And maybe the kids have a greater need for the money now in their 20s and 30s rather than in their 50s or 60s, if that's your life expectancy. So how should the money that you may have earmarked for posterity be invested? That's another consideration. If you know this chunk of money is meant for the grandkids and you have a 20-year time horizon before you expect to pass away, that money should be expected or should be invested perhaps more aggressively, since the money is earmarked for the children and not for your own personal use. So those are the different conversations that you need to have with your advisor to make sure your assets are actually set up properly. And that gets into investing with a purpose. So there's different types of money out there, and if you've sat down with us, you've heard us give this talk before, but everybody's familiar with investing and diversifying your investments, right? You don't own one stock and hope for the best. You own a lot of different things, spread out your risk. Similarly, we want to talk about diversifying your tax buckets. So there are three main types. There's taxable, so money that's taxed as you go along. So a CD that pays interest, you pay taxes. Capital gains and brokerage accounts counts as well. Tax deferred, again, that's that pre-tax money that's never been taxed. So think IRAs, 401ks, TSPs, the portion that has never been taxed by the government. At some point, you will pull it out, whether you want to or not. So if you need it, great. If you don't, that's the RMD. You'll get taxed at ordinary income rates, and that can affect against Social Security and Medicare premiums and a whole host of things. And then there's tax-free. So the main component, the main one we want to talk about is tax-free would be Roth IRA money. So let's imagine that you have a lot of pre-tax money, you're living life, you go through retirement, and then you pass away. So you had been taking RMDs, just the bare minimum because you didn't really need the funds. You pass away, let's say you're 90 and your kids inherit that money. So your kids might be in their late 40s, their 50s, early 60s. They could likely be in their peak income earning years. So you've left behind a sizable portion of assets that's never been taxed. They have 10 years to withdraw those funds and are subject to taxation at their current income rates. So we're in, again, a high income tax state. Your kids may not be, but we are currently. So if they are, then they're going to get taxed at the higher state rate plus federal. If they're making $200,000 or $300,000 a year on top of that, then they're going to be pushed into a higher tax bracket where even more of the assets that you had diligently saved over time are going to go back to the government. One concept we look at to try to avoid that is the Roth conversion. The Roth conversion, of course, has many benefits to you while you're alive, but for a legacy planning tool, it also has a lot of benefits as well. That money is converted, likely if you do the planning right, when you're perhaps in a lower tax bracket than your kids would be. You pass away, that money is now Roth. They inherit the Roth money. They still have the requirement to withdraw the funds in 10 years, but every dollar they take out is a dollar that goes in their pocket. There is no income tax on the Roth IRA distributions. So if legacy is important, if you have a sizable chunk of money that's in the tax deferred bucket, it makes sense in a lot of cases to do the Roth conversions, pay the taxes at a lower rate. That way, when your heirs inherit that money, the taxes have already been paid by you, and now every dollar that's in that account is actually a dollar they get to use. All right, so shifting gears, talking about the long-term care planning aspects of the estate planning. We all see what healthcare costs and how fast they're increasing. Whether you just need regular care or if you need assistance in retirement. The reason we put this on here is that long-term care expenses can quickly erode a very solid nest egg. So this is for 2025 in the state of Minnesota. Independent living will cost about $2,000 to $3,000. Assisted living, you're looking at $5,000 to $6,000. Nursing home care, excuse me, $12,000 to $14,000 per month to basically live there and have your care provided for you. That is a significant drain on resources. It's very eye-opening. It's very sobering to think about. So one of the things we want to be proponents of and kind of push people towards is, how will you pay for care? A lot of folks will say, I'm self-funding, I have my nest egg, I'm not going to blow it all when I'm in 60s and 70s because I think I might need it down the road. So I'm trying to keep some saved and invested to help take care of me in those final years. Ideally, I can age at home as long as possible. Somebody comes in and helps take care of me if necessary, whether that's family or professional service. Some folks rely upon their home, which is their largest assets in a lot of cases, to provide income, which would be looking at like things like a reverse mortgage. There's insurance, whether it's traditional long-term care insurance to cover costs, or life insurance and annuities are tools that we will utilize that have benefits beyond their primary use. So think life insurance, primarily you're doing that for a death benefit. Annuities, you're primarily doing that for an income stream. Each has, there are tools out there that have additional benefits that pertain specifically to long-term care. So if you are in the situation where you need long-term care, your money can work for you in a couple of different ways. These can kick on and try to generate extra income for you to use in those years where your costs have jumped dramatically. If you're a veteran, you have resources. And then some folks say, you know what, I'm going to spend all my money and then the state's going to take care of me. That's Medicaid. So for some folks, you want to avoid as much as possible. Others, they accept that as the reality. But planning should be done here. You can't make these decisions for yourself when you're actually needing the care. So what can we do when you are of sound mind, when you can have the conversations with kids or get the home fitted for staying there as long as possible? Just do it before it's too late is the key. So with long-term care planning, what do you want those years to look like? Do you want to be in a home on other people's schedules and a little bit more restrictive perhaps? You want to stay home and for as long as possible and have a little bit more flexibility and independence. Who's going to take care of you? Do you have somebody in the family that can do that? Or do you have to hire from an outside agency that's going to come in and do it? How much is it going to cost? If you're 70 now and you don't think you'll need it until 85, the inflation rate on healthcare is significantly higher than the average inflation rate. So all things to be thinking about, and that's why we talk about it in our annual review process, is let's have the conversations now before it's too late. Just give some thought to it and see what is your preference and how that's going to be paid for. All right, so also part of estate planning is tax efficient distributions. This goes back to what I said at the beginning. You don't want the government necessarily to be your heir. That speaks largely to making sure your money is passed in a tax efficient manner. Consider the goals relative to the assets and who you want to inherit them. Are you in a lower income tax bracket now than your heirs? Again, that goes back to the required minimum distributions and Roth conversions. Do you want to make sure young kids, young adults don't inherit everything all at once? That's where the planning comes in with a trust. You can specify, you know, this person doesn't get money until they graduate college, or they're 25 or 30 or 35. So it gives you control to make sure assets aren't wasted, so to speak. But you have all kinds of control, and you want to make sure you're doing this in a tax efficient manner. So ideally, you leave behind a Roth IRA where you've paid the taxes for your heirs, rather than a portion of money that's never been taxed. But there's all kinds of situations. Just determine how to transfer the assets at the lowest tax cost for not only yourself, but also your family, because that can have a huge impact on what your legacy actually looks like. So I've laid out all kinds of different concerns and things to think about. Well, how do you actually get that help? So there's three ways really to go about getting an estate plan done. One, you do it yourself. So think there's online resources available where you go online, you sit there, answer a bunch of questions, you get a basic plan built for you, you get it notarized and signed and all that good stuff, and then you have something in place. The other side of the spectrum and is estate planning attorney. So that's more white glove service where you're going to sit down with an attorney and they are going to take you through what their recommendations are, build the packet for you, help you get it implemented. You have a full-blown estate plan done. That can cost several $1,000s. What we found, and this is again the reason the estate planning is at the top of that written plan, is this was the one that was consistently not getting completed, not getting done like we thought it should. So we started Paladin Legal Services, where it is about 1/3 of the cost typically than what an estate planning attorney will charge. Katie Hilbrands in our office handles that. So she sits down with you. There's attorney-backed software. So you go through a whole series of questions. At the end, an attorney puts their stamp of approval on it. Everybody agrees this is what works best for us. We get a binder delivered to us, help you get it notarized. You have a digital copy saved. You also have the physical binder that you can then tell the important people in your life about. Again, about 1/3 of the cost as an attorney. It works for about 90% of our clients, right? If you get into more complex situations, it may not be the best fit, but if you're looking to get a solid plan in place, it's worth exploring Paladin Legal Services. Again, something we bring up in our annual reviews because we want to make sure it gets done. So just consider that. If you have interest, absolutely reach out to us. You can see the number on the screen, 651-842-8406. We can get you set up with Katie and she can do an initial consultation with you. You can also go to our website, paladinfinancial.com. There's a booking section at the top right. You can actually have access to Katie's calendar there and schedule something that way as well. So a little promotion for an upcoming event we have here on the first floor of the Gradient Center, which is the office building that we have our offices in. September 8th, Monday, it's at 5 o'clock. It's the Graceful Exit, Planning Ahead so they don't have to. Now, we set this prior to the Vikings schedule coming out, so we slid everything up because the Vikings do have a game that evening. So we will have dinner at 5. You can come in, get something to eat. We'll have the presentation at 5:45. It'll last about an hour. You're free to leave. You'll make it home in plenty of time for kickoff if that's something you want to do. But Gary Bias of Miller Buys Funeral Home will be talking about the things he's seen in his experience of some of the shortfalls and concerns that you may have, not only prepaying, but pre-planning. Those are two different things. Making sure essential documents are in place, how to have those conversations with your family, because these aren't easy conversations to have. So strongly encourage you to register if you'd like. You can register online, or if you wanted to, just give us a shout, give us a call, and we'll get you set up that way. But if you have ever given thought to this or been in a situation where there was a sudden death and you had to do this for somebody else, strongly encourage you to attend because there will be a lot of meaningful conversations coming out of it. So next step, obviously, sit down, think about what you want to have happen as far as your legacy is concerned, and get at least the basics in place, if not a full-blown estate plan. Make sure you provide us with a copy if you're already done, or if you go through us, we'll have the copy digitized for you and put into your generational vault. Share with your loved ones where that is located and who to contact if something does happen to you. Do the basics. Review the beneficiaries on your various financial accounts. Make sure that old life policy is updated with your kids or your current spouse rather than an ex, or just making sure that if you're a widow or widower that it's updated as well. Make sure you are set up to have your assets transfer as efficient as possible. What types of money do you have? Has it been taxed, or is that a burden that's going to fall on the next generation? Just put your beneficiaries in the best position possible. Make it as easy for them as possible, knowing that they will also be going through a grieving and mourning period as well. and give thought to how you want to cover long-term care should that be an expense that pops up in your life. So a lot of very important things, some heavy conversations, some heavy things to think about, but those that do it, there's a lot of peace of mind that comes along with this. So we strongly encourage you to give the estate planning a thought. And if you're a client of ours, you've had the conversation, and we will continue to push you to get it done if it's something that has not been completed yet. So any questions at all, contact us here at Paladin Financial. We will have this recording online here soon, but we were happy to have further conversations with you, answer questions you have. Just give us a call at 651-842-8406. Thank you.